At 42,000 feet over the Nevada desert, Captain Jake Morrison felt his F-35 Lightning II shudder violently as warning lights flooded his cockpit in crimson. The hydraulic system was failing catastrophically, and he had maybe 8 minutes before complete system failure would make landing impossible. Down in the control tower at Nellis Air Force Base, the woman everyone called Maintenance Only was about to do something that would rewrite aviation history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the flight line at Nellis Air Force Base as Technical Sergeant Lisa Chen walked through the pre-flight inspection checklist for the third time. Her methodical approach to aircraft maintenance had earned her a reputation for thoroughness, but also for being overly cautious among the flight crews who were eager to get airborne for the day's training exercises. At 34, Lisa had spent the last 8 years at Nellis, working exclusively on ground maintenance operations. She arrived at the hangar before dawn every morning, meticulously inspecting aircraft systems, replacing components, and ensuring that every bolt, wire, and fluid level met exact specifications. Her workspace was organized with military precision, tools arranged by size and function, maintenance logs updated to the minute, and diagnostic equipment calibrated regularly. The other maintenance technicians respected her work but found her intensity somewhat puzzling. While they focused on getting aircraft mission ready as quickly as possible, Lisa seemed to study every system as if she were trying to understand its deepest secrets. She would spend extra time reviewing technical manuals, cross-referencing maintenance procedures, and asking detailed questions about aircraft performance that went far beyond her official responsibilities. Captain Jake Morrison emerged from the pilot briefing room, flight suit unzipped at the collar, helmet tucked under his arm. At 29, he was one of the squadron's most promising pilots, with over 200 hours in the F-35 and a natural aptitude for the aircraft's complex systems. He had logged combat missions in 3 different theaters and was being considered for test pilot training at Edwards Air Force Base. Morrison approached his assigned aircraft, tail number 5142, where Lisa was completing her final inspection of the hydraulic system connections. The F-35's hydraulic system was critical for flight control surfaces, landing gear operation, and weapons systems, making it one of the most scrutinized components during pre-flight maintenance. "Morning, Sergeant Chen," Morrison said, reviewing his own pre-flight checklist. "How's she looking today?" Lisa glanced up from the access panel she had been examining, her expression serious but professional. "All systems check normal, sir. Hydraulic pressure is optimal. Fluid levels are within specifications, and I've verified all connection integrity. The aircraft is ready for your mission." Morrison nodded, appreciating her thoroughness, even though he sometimes wondered if she was overly meticulous. Most maintenance personnel would have completed the same inspection in half the time, but Lisa's aircraft never had in-flight mechanical issues. Her attention to detail was legendary, even if it sometimes delayed departure schedules. As Morrison began his external inspection of the aircraft, Lisa continued her work on the hydraulic system, though her inspection was technically complete. She found herself studying the routing of hydraulic lines through the aircraft's structure, mentally tracing the complex network of pressurized fluid that enabled the F-35's flight controls to respond to pilot inputs with precision and reliability. The F-35's fly-by-wire system meant that pilot control inputs were processed by computers that commanded hydraulic actuators to move flight control surfaces. Without hydraulic pressure, the aircraft became essentially uncontrollable, capable of maintaining straight and level flight only until aerodynamic forces overwhelmed the pilot's ability to maintain stability through engine thrust alone. Major Sarah Blackwood, the squadron's operations officer, approached the aircraft to conduct her own pre-flight coordination with Morrison. At 38, she had over 15 years of military aviation experience and was known for her strategic thinking and calm decision-making under pressure. She had been following Morrison's development as a pilot and was particularly interested in his performance during today's training scenario. "Jake, you're leading the 4-ship formation for the defensive counter-air exercise," Blackwood explained, referring to her tablet computer that displayed the day's training objectives. "Weather is clear up to 45,000 feet with light winds. The adversary aircraft will be launching from Creech at 0900, giving you approximately 30 minutes to establish your defensive posture." Morrison studied the mission parameters while Lisa continued her work nearby, unconsciously listening to the operational discussion. Her 8 years of ground maintenance had given her comprehensive understanding of how training missions were conducted, though she had never been directly involved in flight operations planning or execution. The training scenario was designed to test the F-35's sensor fusion capabilities against simulated enemy aircraft. Morrison would lead 3 other F-35s in a complex air-to-air engagement that would push both pilots and aircraft to their operational limits. The exercise would include high-G maneuvering, rapid altitude changes, and coordinated tactics that demanded perfect aircraft performance. As Morrison completed his pre-flight inspection and prepared to begin engine start procedures, Lisa noticed something that caused her to pause. A hydraulic line connection that she had inspected earlier showed a microscopic seepage of fluid, barely visible and well within acceptable tolerances but present nonetheless. Most maintenance personnel would have considered it insignificant, but Lisa's experience had taught her that small problems could become large problems under operational stress. She retrieved a magnifying glass from her toolkit and examined the connection more closely. The seepage was minimal, probably caused by thermal expansion and contraction cycles that created slight variations in fitting tolerances. According to technical orders, the aircraft was safe for flight, but Lisa found herself calculating the potential failure modes that could result from hydraulic system degradation. Captain Morrison noticed Lisa's continued attention to the hydraulic system. "Problem, Sergeant?" "No, sir," Lisa replied, though her tone carried a note of uncertainty. "Just verifying connection integrity. Everything is within specifications." Morrison appreciated her diligence, but he was also aware that the training schedule allowed little margin for delays. The adversary aircraft were operating on a tight timeline, and postponing the exercise would affect multiple squadrons and cost thousands of dollars in wasted training resources. Colonel William Hayes, the wing commander, arrived at the flight line for his routine observation of training operations. At 52, Hayes had commanded operational units in multiple combat deployments and understood the balance between safety and mission requirements. He had been following the squadron's training progress closely, particularly their adaptation to the F-35's advanced capabilities. Hayes approached Morrison's aircraft as the pilot completed his final preparations for engine start. "Captain, I'll be monitoring today's exercise from the control tower. The training objectives are ambitious, but I have confidence in your leadership and the squadron's capabilities." Morrison acknowledged the colonel's presence with appropriate military courtesy, while Lisa continued her work with quiet professionalism. She had observed hundreds of similar interactions over her 8 years at Nellis, watching pilots and commanders focus on operational requirements, while maintenance personnel ensured that aircraft systems would perform reliably under demanding conditions. The relationship between operations and maintenance was always characterized by different priorities and perspectives. Pilots needed aircraft that could accomplish demanding missions, while maintenance personnel were responsible for ensuring that complex systems functioned safely and reliably. These priorities usually aligned but occasionally created tension when operational requirements pushed against maintenance conservatism. As Morrison began his engine start sequence, Lisa completed her documentation of the pre-flight inspection, noting the minor hydraulic seepage she had observed but concluding that the aircraft was safe for the planned mission. The seepage was within acceptable limits, all other systems were functioning normally, and delaying the flight for such a minor issue would be considered excessive caution by most maintenance standards. However, Lisa found herself mentally reviewing hydraulic system schematics as Morrison's engine spooled up to idle power. The F-35's hydraulic system was designed with multiple redundancies, but catastrophic failure of the primary system would leave the pilot with limited control authority and require immediate landing at the nearest suitable airfield. The probability of such a failure was extremely low, particularly given the aircraft's maintenance history and Lisa's thorough inspection, but her 8 years of studying aircraft systems had taught her that mechanical failures often occurred when multiple small problems combined under operational stress to create larger issues that individual components had been designed to handle. Morrison's F-35 rolled down the taxiway toward runway 21L as the Nevada sun climbed higher into the cloudless desert sky. The aircraft's Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine produced a distinctive low-frequency rumble that resonated across the flight line, where Lisa Chen stood watching the departure with professional interest that went beyond her official duties. From the control tower, Major Blackwood coordinated with air traffic control to ensure clear airspace for the four-ship formation. The training exercise would take the F-35s through a complex series of maneuvers designed to test their sensor fusion capabilities against simulated threats. Each aircraft carried advanced radar and electronic warfare systems that would be pushed to their operational limits during the 2-hour mission. Lieutenant Colonel David Park, the squadron commander, had designed today's training scenario based on real-world threat assessments from recent intelligence briefings. At 45, Park had combat experience in multiple theaters and understood the importance of realistic training that prepared pilots for the complex electromagnetic environment they would face in actual combat situations. As Morrison's aircraft reached the runway threshold, Lisa found herself mentally reviewing the hydraulic system schematic she had studied countless times during her maintenance training. The microscopic seepage she had observed was still bothering her, not because it represented an immediate safety concern, but because her experience had taught her that aircraft systems often failed in unexpected ways when subjected to operational stress. The F-35's hydraulic system operated at 3,000 pounds per square inch, generating enormous force to move flight control surfaces against aerodynamic loads that could exceed several thousand pounds during high-G maneuvering. Even minor degradation in system integrity could cascade into major problems when the aircraft was operating at its performance limits. Morrison advanced the throttle to military power, feeling the familiar surge of acceleration as 43,000 pounds of thrust pushed the 35,000-pound aircraft down the runway. The F-35's advanced flight control computers automatically adjusted control surface positions to maintain optimal lift and stability during the takeoff roll, relying entirely on hydraulic actuators to execute these microsecond adjustments. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. At 165 knots, Morrison pulled back on the control stick, and the F-35 lifted off smoothly into the clear desert air. The aircraft systems were functioning perfectly, with all engine parameters normal and flight controls responding with the precision that made the F-35 one of the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. Captain Rebecca Torres, flying as Morrison's wingman in aircraft 5089, completed her own takeoff 30 seconds later. At 27, Torres was relatively new to the F-35, but had quickly adapted to its complex systems and was developing a reputation as a skilled tactician. She had flown F-16s for 3 years before transitioning to the Lightning II and appreciated the F-35's advanced sensor capabilities. As the four-ship formation climbed through 15,000 feet toward their assigned operating altitude, Lisa returned to the maintenance hangar where she began preparing for the post-flight inspections that would be required when the aircraft returned. Her work was routine but essential, checking fluid levels, examining components for wear or damage, and ensuring that each aircraft remained mission-ready for subsequent operations. Technical Sergeant Marcus Williams, who worked the adjacent maintenance bay, noticed Lisa's continued attention to hydraulic system technical orders. At 31, Williams had 6 years of F-35 maintenance experience and was known for his efficiency in completing required inspections and repairs. He had worked with Lisa for 3 years and respected her thoroughness, though he sometimes wondered if she overcomplicated routine maintenance procedures. "Chen, you've been studying those hydraulic schematics all morning," Williams observed. "Something specific you're looking for? Or just brushing up on the technical details?" Lisa looked up from the maintenance manual she had been reviewing, considering how to explain her persistent concern about the minor seepage she had observed. "Just making sure I understand all the failure modes. The hydraulic system is pretty complex, and I want to be prepared for anything unusual that might show up during post-flight." Williams nodded, appreciating her dedication while also recognizing that Lisa approached maintenance with an intensity that went beyond what most technicians considered necessary. Her aircraft consistently passed inspections and rarely experienced in-flight problems, but her methods were more thorough than standard procedures required. At 25,000 feet, Morrison's formation reached their assigned altitude and began the tactical phase of their training mission. The exercise scenario placed them in a defensive posture against simulated enemy aircraft that would approach from multiple directions, testing their ability to coordinate sensor data and engage threats while maintaining formation integrity. Captain Torres scanned her cockpit displays, monitoring the complex array of information provided by the F-35 sensor fusion system. The aircraft's radar, electronic warfare sensors, and communications systems created a comprehensive picture of the tactical environment that was displayed on her helmet-mounted display and cockpit screens. The training adversaries, flying modified F-16s equipped with electronic jammers and radar reflectors to simulate enemy aircraft signatures, began their approach from the northwest. Their mission was to penetrate the F-35 formation's defensive perimeter and simulate attacks on high-value targets located 50 miles behind the Lightning II fighters. Morrison initiated the first tactical maneuver, a coordinated turn that would position his formation to intercept the approaching threats. The F-35s responded smoothly to his control inputs, their fly-by-wire systems automatically coordinating aileron, elevator, and rudder movements to maintain optimal flight characteristics during the high-G turn. In the control tower at Nellis, Colonel Hayes monitored the exercise through radar displays and radio communications, evaluating the squadron's performance against the challenging scenario. The training objectives required split-second decision-making and precise coordination between aircraft, testing both individual pilot skills and unit-level tactical procedures. Major Blackwood, serving as the exercise controller, tracked each aircraft's position and performance through sophisticated computer systems that recorded every aspect of the training engagement. The data would be analyzed after the mission to identify areas for improvement and validate tactical procedures that might be used in actual combat situations. As Morrison's formation maneuvered to engage the simulated threats, the F-35s pulled sustained G-forces that placed significant stress on all aircraft systems. The hydraulic actuators worked continuously to maintain precise control surface positions, operating under the exact conditions that could reveal weaknesses in components that appeared normal during ground testing. At 32,000 feet, Morrison rolled his F-35 into a steep diving turn to position for a simulated missile engagement. The maneuver required rapid control inputs and generated G-forces approaching the aircraft's structural limits. Every system on the aircraft was operating at peak performance, including the hydraulic system that Lisa had been concerned about during her pre-flight inspection. Captain Torres followed Morrison through the tactical maneuver, her F-35 responding smoothly to control inputs despite the demanding flight conditions. The formation maintained precise positioning while engaging multiple simulated threats, demonstrating the capabilities that made the F-35 such an effective air superiority fighter. Back at Nellis, Lisa continued her preparation for post-flight maintenance, reviewing technical procedures and organizing tools that would be needed for the detailed inspections required after high-G flight operations. Her systematic approach to maintenance planning ensured that aircraft turnaround times were minimized while maintaining the thorough inspection standards that kept the F-35 fleet mission-ready. The training exercise continued with increasing complexity as additional simulated threats entered the tactical environment. Morrison's formation adapted their tactics to address multiple challenges simultaneously, showcasing the advanced capabilities that distinguish the F-35 from previous generation fighter aircraft. At 38,000 feet, during a particularly demanding maneuver sequence, Morrison felt a subtle change in his aircraft's control response. The difference was barely perceptible, but his experience told him that something had shifted in the F-35's flight characteristics. The aircraft was still responding normally to control inputs, but there was a slight decrease in the crispness of control surface movement that suggested possible hydraulic system degradation. Morrison's concern about the subtle control changes intensified as he executed another high-G maneuver at 41,000 feet. The F-35's response to his stick inputs had developed a slight delay that wasn't present during takeoff, suggesting progressive degradation in the hydraulic system's ability to move flight control surfaces with normal authority. "Viper-led, this is Tower Control," came the voice of Air Traffic Controller Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh through Morrison's headset. "We're tracking your formation at Angels 41, showing normal parameters on all aircraft. Continue with training objectives as planned." Walsh had been monitoring the exercise from Nellis Approach Control for the past 45 minutes, coordinating airspace deconfliction between the F-35 formation and other aircraft operating in the Nevada Test and Training Range. At 28, she had 5 years of air traffic control experience and was skilled at managing complex military training operations that involved multiple aircraft types and varying mission requirements. Morrison keyed his radio to acknowledge the transmission while privately wrestling with his growing concern about his aircraft's handling characteristics. Military pilots were trained to trust their instincts about aircraft performance, but they were also taught to avoid unnecessary mission aborts that wasted valuable training resources and disrupted carefully coordinated exercises. Captain Torres, maintaining formation position off Morrison's right wing, noticed her flight leader's aircraft exhibiting slight oscillations during the latest tactical maneuver. The movements were subtle but consistent with an aircraft experiencing control system degradation. Her training had taught her to monitor other aircraft for signs of mechanical problems that pilots might not immediately recognize from inside their own cockpits. Viper-led Viper 2, Torres transmitted over the secure tactical frequency. I'm observing minor flight path deviations during your last maneuver sequence. Everything normal on your end? Morrison appreciated Torres's observation, which confirmed his own suspicions about degrading aircraft performance. The F-35's advanced flight control computers were compensating for hydraulic system problems by making continuous micro-adjustments. But these corrections were becoming visible to external observers as slight instabilities in flight path control. Viper 2 lead. Concur with your observation. I'm showing normal indications on all cockpit displays, but control response feels slightly degraded. Continuing to monitor. In the maintenance hangar at Nellis, Lisa Chen was updating aircraft status logs when she received an automated alert from the F-35's ground-based monitoring system. The aircraft's onboard computers continuously transmitted performance data to ground stations, allowing maintenance personnel to monitor system health during flight operations. The alert indicated hydraulic system pressure fluctuations in Morrison's aircraft that were approaching the lower limits of acceptable parameters. The fluctuations were intermittent and hadn't triggered cockpit warning systems, but they suggested progressive deterioration in system integrity that could eventually result in complete hydraulic failure. Lisa immediately contacted the control tower through the maintenance coordination frequency. Nellis Tower, maintenance control. We're receiving telemetry data from Viper-led indicating developing hydraulic system anomalies. Pressure fluctuations are intermittent but trending toward caution range parameters. Major Blackwood, monitoring the exercise from the tower, received Lisa's report with growing concern. Hydraulic system failures in high-performance aircraft could develop rapidly from minor problems into flight-critical emergencies, particularly when aircraft were operating under the stress conditions of tactical maneuvering. Maintenance Control Tower, what's your assessment of the situation? Are we looking at an immediate safety concern, or a developing problem that can wait until mission completion? Lisa studied the telemetry data streaming from Morrison's aircraft, noting patterns that matched her theoretical knowledge of hydraulic system failure modes. The pressure fluctuations were occurring during high-G maneuvers when system demands were greatest, suggesting that a component was failing under operational stress but maintaining function during normal flight conditions. Tower, based on current trends, the aircraft should be able to complete the training mission, but I recommend avoiding high-G maneuvering and considering early recovery to base. The system degradation appears to be progressive. Colonel Hayes, who had been observing the exercise, stepped closer to the communication console. Military commanders constantly balanced operational requirements against safety considerations. And hydraulic system problems represented one of the most serious mechanical failures that could affect high-performance aircraft. Major Blackwood, what's the current exercise status? How much training value are we losing if we terminate early? Blackwood consulted her mission timeline and training objectives. The formation had completed approximately 60% of their planned scenarios and had successfully demonstrated most of the tactical procedures that were the exercise's primary goals. Early termination would cost some training value but wouldn't negate the mission's overall effectiveness. Sir, we've accomplished the core training objectives. The remaining scenarios are valuable but not critical. We could recover the formation now without significant training degradation. At 42,000 feet, Morrison continued monitoring his aircraft's performance while maintaining formation integrity with his three wingmen. The F-35's cockpit warning systems remained silent, but his pilot instincts told him that the aircraft's condition was deteriorating. The control stick required slightly more force to achieve the same response, and the aircraft's stability during formation flight required more frequent corrections. Captain Torres continued her external observation of Morrison's aircraft, noting increasing frequency of the slight oscillations she had first observed 15 minutes earlier. Her tactical training included procedures for assisting flight leaders who were experiencing mechanical problems, but those procedures assumed that problems were severe enough to trigger cockpit warning systems. Viper lead, your aircraft is showing increasing flight path instabilities. Recommend we consider early recovery to base. Morrison appreciated Torres's continued monitoring and professional assessment. Young pilots sometimes hesitated to question senior officers, but Torres demonstrated the mature judgment that made her valuable as a wingman and future flight leader. Viper 2 lead, concur with your recommendation. I'm showing a degraded control response that's getting progressively worse. In the control tower, the conversation between maintenance personnel and operations staff focused on developing a recovery plan that would get Morrison's aircraft safely back to Nellis before the hydraulic system degradation became critical. Lisa's technical expertise was becoming crucial for understanding the timeline they were working with. Maintenance control. How rapidly do you expect the hydraulic degradation to progress? Major Blackwood asked. We need to know if this is a situation where we have time for a normal recovery or if we're looking at a potential emergency. Lisa consulted her technical references while continuing to monitor the telemetry data from Morrison's aircraft. Her 8 years of maintenance experience had exposed her to numerous hydraulic system failures. But each situation developed according to its own timeline based on the specific nature of the component failure and operating conditions. Tower. Based on historical failure patterns and current rate of degradation, I estimate 15 to 20 minutes before the system reaches critically low pressure levels. However, failure could accelerate rapidly if the aircraft encounters severe turbulence or performs aggressive maneuvering. The timeline Lisa provided created urgency for the recovery operation. Morrison's current position was approximately 120 miles from Nellis, requiring 12 to 15 minutes of flight time under normal conditions. If the hydraulic system failed completely before he reached the base, the aircraft would become extremely difficult to control and might not be recoverable. Morrison, monitoring his aircraft's continuing degradation, made the decision to declare an emergency and request immediate recovery to Nellis. Military pilots were trained to err on the side of caution when mechanical problems threatened flight safety, and his aircraft's condition was clearly deteriorating beyond acceptable parameters. Nellis Tower, Viper lead declaring an emergency, experiencing progressive hydraulic system failure, requesting immediate vector to base and emergency services standing by. The declaration of emergency immediately activated established procedures throughout the air traffic control system and base operations. Emergency vehicles would be positioned along the runway, medical personnel would be alerted, and all other air traffic would be cleared from Nellis airspace to provide Morrison with priority handling. Colonel Hayes took direct control of the emergency response coordination. All stations, Viper-led has declared emergency due to hydraulic system failure. Clear all traffic from Nellis airspace and prepare for emergency recovery. Maintenance control, I need your best technical advice on managing this situation. Lisa found herself thrust into a position of critical responsibility that went far beyond her normal maintenance duties. Her technical knowledge of F-35 systems was about to become essential for safely recovering an aircraft and pilot facing a potentially catastrophic mechanical failure. As Morrison began his emergency descent toward Nellis, the F-35's hydraulic system pressure dropped another 5%, triggering the first cockpit caution light. The amber warning illuminated on his primary flight display, confirming what his pilot instincts had been telling him for the past 20 minutes. His aircraft was experiencing a serious mechanical failure that was progressing toward a flight-critical emergency. Nellis Tower, Viper lead. I now have hydraulic caution lights. System pressure is showing 2,400 psi and declining. Request immediate approach clearance and foam the runway. Master Sergeant Robert Kane, the base fire chief, received the alert in the emergency services building and immediately dispatched 3 crash rescue vehicles toward runway 21L. At 42, Kane had responded to dozens of aircraft emergencies during his 18-year career, but F-35 hydraulic failures were among the most challenging situations his crews faced due to the aircraft's complete dependence on hydraulic power for flight control. In the control tower, Lisa Chen found herself at the center of a rapidly developing crisis that would test her technical knowledge in ways she had never anticipated. Colonel Hayes turned to her with an expression that conveyed both authority and desperate hope. Sergeant Chen, I need you to tell me exactly what we're dealing with here. What happens when that hydraulic pressure reaches zero? And what can the pilot do to maintain control? Lisa took a deep breath, realizing that her response would influence decisions that could determine whether Morrison lived or died. Her 8 years of ground maintenance had given her theoretical knowledge of hydraulic system failures, but she had never been responsible for guiding a pilot through an actual emergency. "Sir, when hydraulic pressure drops below 1,800 psi, the flight control surfaces become increasingly difficult to move. Below 1,200 psi, the pilot loses most control authority except for engine thrust and rudder trim. At zero pressure, the aircraft becomes essentially uncontrollable." Colonel Hayes absorbed this information while mentally calculating the timeline they were working with. Morrison's aircraft was still 80 miles from Nellis, and his hydraulic pressure was declining at approximately 100 psi per minute. Simple mathematics suggested he had less than 10 minutes before reaching critically low pressure levels. What options does the pilot have for maintaining control if the system fails completely? Lisa hesitated, knowing that her answer would reveal knowledge that went far beyond what a maintenance technician should possess. Her understanding of F-35 flight characteristics came from sources she had never disclosed to anyone at Nellis, and explaining her expertise would require admissions she had been avoiding for 8 years. "Sir, there is a manual reversion mode that allows limited control through mechanical backup systems, but it requires specific pilot inputs and understanding of the aircraft's aerodynamic characteristics at various flight conditions." Major Blackwood, coordinating the emergency response, looked at Lisa with surprise. "Sergeant, how do you know about manual reversion procedures? That's not covered in standard maintenance training." The question hung in the air as everyone in the control tower waited for Lisa's response. Her knowledge of advanced F-35 systems had suddenly become crucial for the emergency, but explaining how she possessed such detailed information would expose the carefully guarded secret of her professional background. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio, adding urgency to the situation. "Nellis Tower, Viper lead. Hydraulic pressure, now at 2,200 psi and falling faster. I'm having difficulty maintaining precise flight path control. What guidance can you provide for emergency procedures?" Colonel Hayes looked directly at Lisa, his expression making clear that he needed answers immediately. "Sergeant Chen, I don't care how you know what you know. Right now, you're the only person here with detailed knowledge of this aircraft's emergency procedures. What do we tell him?" Lisa realized that Morrison's life depended on information she possessed, but had never expected to use. Her secret expertise in F-35 systems was about to be revealed in the most dramatic way possible, but saving the pilot's life was more important than maintaining her carefully constructed anonymity. "Sir, Captain Morrison needs to configure the aircraft for manual reversion immediately, before hydraulic pressure drops below critical levels. The procedure involves specific control inputs that prepare the flight control computers for backup operation." "Walk me through it," Hayes commanded. Lisa moved to the radio console, her voice taking on a technical authority that surprised everyone who had known her only as a maintenance scheduler. "Viper lead, this is Nellis maintenance control. You need to activate manual reversion mode immediately, move the throttle to 85% power, and maintain level flight. Then simultaneously pull the circuit breaker for the primary flight control computer and engage the backup hydraulic pump." Morrison's training had covered manual reversion procedures, but only briefly and never under actual emergency conditions. The complexity of the F-35 systems meant that pilots relied heavily on ground-based technical expertise during unusual situations, particularly when dealing with multiple system failures. "Maintenance control Viper lead. I'm not familiar with those specific procedures. Can you confirm the circuit breaker location and backup pump activation sequence?" Lisa's response demonstrated knowledge that went far beyond standard maintenance training. "Viper lead, the primary flight control circuit breaker is located on panel C-3, position 14. The backup hydraulic pump switch is on the emergency systems panel, labeled EMERGHYD pump. Activate the pump first, then pull the circuit breaker." Captain Torres, still flying formation with Morrison despite the emergency, watched her flight leader's aircraft carefully as he began implementing the emergency procedures. The F-35's flight characteristics changed noticeably as Morrison activated backup systems, with control surface movements becoming more deliberate and less precise. "Viper lead, Viper 2, I'm observing changes in your flight control behavior. Aircraft appear to be responding more slowly to control inputs." Morrison confirmed Torres's observation while continuing to work through the emergency checklist. "Viper 2, concur. Control response is definitely degraded, but I'm maintaining flight path control. Hydraulic pressure is now at 1,900 psi. In the control tower, Lisa continued providing technical guidance, while Colonel Hayes and Major Blackwood coordinated the overall emergency response. Her knowledge of F-35 systems was proving invaluable, but her ability to provide such detailed information was raising questions that she knew she would eventually have to answer. Technical Sergeant Williams, who had been monitoring the emergency from the maintenance hangar, arrived in the control tower with a puzzled expression. He had worked with Lisa for 3 years and was astounded by her demonstrated expertise in advanced F-35 systems that were far beyond the scope of routine maintenance training. "Sergeant Chen," Williams said quietly, "where did you learn about manual reversion procedures? That's flight test pilot level knowledge." Lisa continued monitoring Morrison's situation while preparing her response to a question she had been dreading for 8 years. Her background in aerospace engineering and test pilot training was about to be revealed in circumstances that would make concealment impossible. Colonel Hayes, overhearing Williams's question, turned toward Lisa with renewed interest. "Sergeant, I think it's time you explained exactly what your qualifications are. Your knowledge of these systems goes far beyond what any maintenance technician should possess." Morrison's voice interrupted the conversation as his situation continued deteriorating. "Nellis Tower, Viper lead. Hydraulic pressure is now at 1,700 psi and I'm 60 miles out. The manual reversion mode is working, but control authority is continuing to degrade. I need more specific guidance for approach and landing procedures under these conditions." Lisa looked around the control tower at the faces of people who had worked with her for years without knowing her true background. Morrison's life hung in the balance, and her expertise represented his best chance for survival. The time for maintaining her secret had passed. "Colonel Hayes," she said with quiet determination, "before I continue providing technical guidance, you should know that I'm not just a maintenance technician. I'm a former Air Force test pilot with over 1,200 hours in F-35 prototypes. I helped develop many of the emergency procedures Captain Morrison is going to need to survive this landing." The control tower fell silent for 3 seconds as Lisa's revelations sank in. Colonel Hayes stared at her with a mixture of shock and growing comprehension, while Major Blackwood's expression shifted from confusion to urgent calculation of how this information changed their emergency response capabilities. "Test pilot?" Hayes asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone processing information that fundamentally altered his understanding of the situation. "How many hours do you have in the F-35? 1,247 hours, sir. I was part of the developmental test program at Edwards from 2014 to 2016. I flew envelope expansion flights, including extensive testing of emergency procedures and failure mode scenarios." Morrison's voice crackled through the radio again, adding immediacy to the revelation. "Nellis Tower, Viper lead. Hydraulic pressure now at 1,500 psi. I'm 45 miles out and experiencing increasing difficulty maintaining altitude. Need immediate guidance on approach procedures." Lisa stepped fully into her role as the emergency's technical expert, her demeanor transforming from quiet maintenance technician to confident test pilot. "Viper lead, this is Major Lisa Chen, former F-35 test pilot. I'm going to talk you through emergency approach procedures that I helped develop during the flight test program." The use of her actual rank stunned everyone in the control tower. Technical Sergeant Williams stepped back, realizing that the woman he had worked alongside for 3 years was actually a field-grade officer with test pilot credentials that represented the pinnacle of military aviation expertise. "Major Chen," Colonel Hayes said, his tone shifting to reflect appropriate military courtesy, "I need to understand your current status. Are you on active duty, retired, or separated from service?" "I'm on inactive reserve status, sir. I took a break from flying after completing my test pilot tour and requested assignment to ground duties. I've been serving in an enlisted capacity by choice, not requirement." Morrison's situation continued deteriorating as they spoke. "Major Chen, Viper lead. I'm showing 1,400 psi, and the aircraft is becoming increasingly difficult to control. What specific approach procedures do you recommend?" Lisa moved to the radio console with the authority of someone who had guided dozens of test flights through similar emergencies. Her knowledge of F-35 systems came from actual experience flying the aircraft through its most challenging test scenarios, including deliberate hydraulic failures conducted to validate emergency procedures. "Viper lead, You're going to need to fly a non-standard approach that maximizes your remaining control authority. Maintain current altitude until you're 20 miles from the field, then begin a continuous descent at 500 feet per minute. Keep your airspeed at exactly 180 knots. Any faster and you'll lose control authority. Any slower and you'll stall. Captain Torres, still maintaining formation with Morrison, could see her flight leader's aircraft exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior as the hydraulic system pressure continued falling. The F-35's normally precise control responses had become sluggish and unpredictable, requiring constant pilot corrections to maintain stable flight. Viper-led Viper 2. Your aircraft is showing significant flight path deviations. I can see control surface movements that appear delayed and inconsistent. Morrison confirmed Torres's observations while struggling with his aircraft's degraded handling characteristics. Viper 2, concur. Control inputs are requiring much more force, and there's a significant delay between stick movement and aircraft response. Major Chen, I need more specific guidance on managing these control difficulties. Lisa's test pilot experience included extensive training in aircraft with degraded or failed control systems. She had deliberately flown F-35s with simulated hydraulic failures to understand exactly how pilots could maintain control under these emergency conditions. Viper-led, the key is to make all control inputs very gradually and anticipate delayed responses. Think of flying the aircraft like it's 3 times heavier than normal. Use small inputs and wait for the aircraft to respond before making additional corrections. In the base fire station, Master Sergeant Kane briefed his crash rescue teams on the specific challenges they would face with an F-35 hydraulic failure emergency. The aircraft's composite construction and advanced systems created unique hazards that required specialized response procedures. Listen up, people. We've got an F-35 coming in with complete hydraulic failure. That means the pilot has minimal control authority and may not be able to execute a normal landing. Be prepared for a long rollout, possible runway departure, or emergency ejection scenarios. Chief Master Sergeant Patricia Valdez, the base's senior enlisted advisor, arrived in the control tower after receiving word about the emergency. At 48, Valdez had 26 years of military experience and had never encountered a situation where an enlisted member was revealed to be a major serving in a subordinate capacity. Colonel Hayes, I need to understand the personnel situation here. How does a major end up serving as a technical sergeant for 3 years without anyone knowing? Hayes looked at Lisa, who was continuing to provide technical guidance to Morrison while monitoring his aircraft's deteriorating condition. Chief Valdez, we'll sort out the administrative details after we get Captain Morrison safely on the ground. Right now, Major Chen's expertise is the only thing standing between that pilot and a potential catastrophe. Morrison's voice carried increasing stress as his hydraulic pressure approached critical levels. Major Chen, Viper lead. Pressure is now at 1,200 psi and falling rapidly. I'm 30 miles out and having extreme difficulty maintaining level flight. The aircraft wants to roll left continuously. Lisa's response demonstrated the calm professionalism that had made her an exceptional test pilot. Viper led, the left roll tendency is normal for this failure mode. Counter it with steady right aileron pressure, but don't fight it too aggressively. You're going to have to accept some lateral deviation during the approach. Lieutenant Colonel Park, the squadron commander, arrived in the control tower after being alerted to the emergency involving one of his pilots. His first priority was Morrison's safety, but he was also trying to process the revelation that his maintenance section included a test pilot whose qualifications exceeded those of most pilots in his squadron. Major Chen, what's the probability of a successful landing with complete hydraulic failure? Lisa's answer reflected her honest assessment based on test flight experience with similar emergencies. Sir, if Captain Morrison follows emergency procedures precisely and the weather remains calm, I estimate about a 70% chance of a successful landing. The variables are his ability to maintain control during the final approach and flare, and whether the backup systems continue functioning. Morrison's transmission interrupted their conversation. Major Chen, Viper lead, I'm now showing 1,000 psi. The aircraft is extremely difficult to control, and I'm not sure I can maintain this for another 20 minutes. Viper lead, you're approaching decision time. With pressure that low, you have maybe 5 more minutes before the aircraft becomes uncontrollable. I need you to begin your approach immediately, even though you're still 25 miles out. Colonel Hayes authorized the immediate approach while coordinating with base medical and emergency services. At all stations, Viper Lead is beginning an emergency approach with critical hydraulic failure. Clear all personnel from runway areas and position emergency vehicles along the entire landing surface. Lisa continued her technical guidance while mentally reviewing every emergency procedure she had tested during her F-35 developmental flights. Morrison's situation was approaching the limits of what the aircraft could handle, and his survival would depend on flawless execution of procedures under the most challenging conditions possible. Viper Lead, begin your descent now at 600 feet per minute. Reduce power gradually to maintain 175 knots airspeed. The most critical phase will be the final approach. You'll need to execute the landing flare using engine power rather than elevator control. As Morrison began his emergency descent toward Nellis, everyone in the control tower understood that they were witnessing a life-or-death situation that would test both pilot skill and the emergency procedures that Lisa had helped develop during her secret previous career as one of the Air Force's most qualified test pilots. Morrison's F-35 descended through 8,000 feet as his hydraulic pressure gauge showed 850 psi, well into the danger zone where aircraft control became a battle between pilot skill and aerodynamic forces that wanted to tear the aircraft apart. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly below him, but his focus remained locked on the runway at Nellis, still 15 miles ahead and barely visible through the afternoon haze. Major Chen, Viper Lead. I'm experiencing severe control difficulties. The aircraft is requiring constant pressure on the stick just to maintain wings level, and any turbulence causes immediate rolling motion that takes several seconds to correct. Lisa's voice remained steady despite the gravity of Morrison's situation. Her test pilot training had prepared her for exactly this scenario, talking pilots through emergencies where split-second decisions determine survival. Viper Lead. That's expected behavior at your current pressure level. Focus on maintaining airspeed at 175 knots. Don't chase altitude deviations unless you're more than 200 feet off target. Captain Torres continued flying formation with Morrison, though she had moved her aircraft to a safer distance to avoid any potential collision if his F-35 became uncontrollable. Her position allowed her to observe his aircraft's increasingly erratic behavior while providing external visual reference for his approach. Viper Lead, Viper 2. Your flight path is showing increasing oscillations, but you're maintaining generally stable descent. I can see your control surfaces moving constantly. The aircraft is working hard to stay stable. In the crash rescue vehicles positioned along runway 21L, firefighter teams prepared for scenarios ranging from a successful emergency landing to a catastrophic crash. Technical Sergeant Amanda Foster, the lead crash rescue specialist, coordinated her teams through radio communications while monitoring Morrison's approach progress. All rescue units, be advised the approaching aircraft has zero effective flight controls. Expect possible runway departure, hard landing impact, or emergency ejection. Have foam systems ready for immediate deployment. Foster had responded to aircraft emergencies for 8 years, but F-35 hydraulic failures represented the most challenging situations her teams faced. The aircraft's advanced composite construction meant that crashes could produce toxic smoke and require specialized suppression techniques that differed significantly from conventional aircraft fires. Lisa continued monitoring Morrison's descent while mentally calculating the precise timing required for his final approach sequence. Her test pilot experience included multiple flights where she had deliberately induced hydraulic failures to validate emergency procedures, giving her intimate knowledge of exactly what Morrison was experiencing. Viper Lead, you're approaching the most critical phase of this emergency. At 5,000 feet, you'll begin losing what remaining control authority you have. I need you to configure for landing immediately. Landing gear down. Flaps to approach setting. Morrison's response revealed the increasing difficulty he faced controlling his aircraft. Major Chen, I'm reluctant to extend landing gear and flaps with this little hydraulic pressure. Won't that make the aircraft even harder to control? Negative, Viper Lead. The landing gear and flaps are operated by backup systems that don't rely on your primary hydraulics. More importantly, you need the additional drag and stability they provide. Without them, the aircraft will be impossible to slow down for landing. Colonel Hayes monitored the emergency coordination while trying to process the administrative implications of discovering that one of his maintenance technicians was actually a field-grade officer with test pilot credentials. His immediate focus remained on Morrison's survival, but the situation raised questions that would require extensive investigation. Commander of Air Force personnel, Brigadier General Susan Martinez, was being briefed on the situation via secure telephone from her Pentagon office. The revelation that a major had been serving in an enlisted capacity for 3 years without detection represented a significant personnel management failure that would demand explanation at the highest levels. Colonel Hayes, after this emergency is resolved, I want a complete investigation into how Major Chen's actual status went undetected for 3 years. This represents a serious breakdown in our personnel accountability systems. Hayes acknowledged the general's concerns while continuing to focus on the immediate crisis. Understood, ma'am. Right now, Major Chen's expertise is the only thing keeping Captain Morrison alive. We'll address the administrative issues once he's safely on the ground. Morrison began extending his landing gear as his aircraft passed through 4,000 feet, immediately feeling the additional drag and changes in flight characteristics that Lisa had predicted. The F-35's behavior became slightly more stable, but control authority continued diminishing as hydraulic pressure dropped toward zero. Major Chen, Viper-led. Landing gear is down and locked. Hydraulic pressure is now at 600 psi. The aircraft feels like it's flying through thick mud. Every control input requires enormous effort. Viper-led, that's exactly what I expected. You're doing outstanding work managing this emergency. Now extend flaps to approach setting and reduce power to maintain 165 knots airspeed. Lisa's guidance reflected years of experience flying aircraft with degraded control systems. During her test pilot career, she had pushed F-35 prototypes through emergency scenarios that regular operational pilots never encountered, building expertise that was now proving crucial for Morrison's survival. Air Traffic Controller Walsh cleared all other aircraft from Nellis airspace while coordinating Morrison's final approach with emergency services and base operations. Her 5 years of controlling military traffic had included numerous emergency situations, but none involving an aircraft with complete control system failure. Viper lead, Nellis Tower. You're cleared for emergency approach runway 21L. Emergency services are in position. Winds are calm at less than 5 knots. Optimal conditions for your landing attempt. Morrison acknowledged the clearance while struggling with his aircraft's deteriorating handling characteristics. At 2,500 feet and 10 miles from the runway, his F-35 required constant control inputs just to maintain approximate flight path stability. Major Chen, I'm not sure I can maintain control much longer. The aircraft wants to roll left continuously, and correcting it takes several seconds of full right aileron. I'm fighting the controls constantly. Lisa's response reflected her understanding of exactly what Morrison was experiencing. Viper-led. You're approaching the limits of controllable flight. In 2 minutes, you'll need to commit fully to the landing approach. Once you begin final descent, there won't be any opportunity for a go-around or course corrections. Captain Torres, monitoring Morrison's increasingly difficult situation, made a decision that reflected both her loyalty as a wingman and her professional judgment as a pilot. Viper lead, Viper 2. Request permission to escort you through the final approach. I can provide external visual reference and call out any flight path deviations. Morrison appreciated Torres's offer, knowing that external visual reference could be crucial during the final moments of his approach, when his attention would be completely focused on controlling his aircraft. Viper 2, led. Approved for close formation escort through landing. Lisa continued providing technical guidance while monitoring Morrison's aircraft telemetry data that was being transmitted to ground stations. The information showed systems operating at the absolute limits of their design parameters, with backup systems compensating for the complete failure of primary flight controls. Viper lead, you're at 1,500 feet and 6 miles from touchdown. Begin final descent at 500 feet per minute. Reduce power gradually, but be prepared to add power immediately if the aircraft becomes uncontrollable. Morrison initiated his final approach, knowing that his next few minutes would determine whether he survived the emergency or became another statistic in military aviation accidents. His F-35 responded sluggishly to control inputs, requiring anticipation and careful management of every flight parameter. Major Chen, beginning final approach. Hydraulic pressure is at 400 psi and still falling. Control response is extremely degraded, but I'm maintaining a decent profile. The control tower fell silent, except for essential communications as everyone focused on Morrison's approach. Lisa continued monitoring his progress while mentally reviewing every aspect of the emergency procedures she had helped develop during her years as a test pilot. Knowing that Morrison's life depended on flawless execution of techniques she had personally validated through dangerous flight testing. Morrison's F-35 crossed the runway threshold at 800 feet above ground level with hydraulic pressure reading 200 psi, barely enough to maintain minimal control surface movement. The aircraft shuddered through the desert air as backup systems struggled to compensate for the complete failure of primary flight controls, while Morrison fought to maintain his approach angle through sheer pilot skill and determination. "Viper lead, you're slightly high on glide path," Captain Torres called from her escort position. "Recommend small power reduction to correct descent rate." Morrison's response came through gritted teeth as he wrestled with controls that felt like they were connected to the aircraft through thick molasses. "Reducing power now." "Major Chen, I'm at 200 psi and the aircraft is barely responding to control inputs. This is going to be close." Lisa's voice remained calm and authoritative despite the life-or-death drama unfolding before her eyes. "Viper lead, you're doing exactly what you need to do. At 100 feet above the runway, reduce power to idle and let the aircraft settle. Don't try to flare normally, use engine power to control your descent rate." The crash rescue teams positioned along the runway held their breath as Morrison's F-35 descended through 300 feet. Technical Sergeant Foster monitored the approach through binoculars, noting the aircraft's unusual flight characteristics that indicated a pilot operating at the absolute limits of controllable flight. "All rescue units, aircraft are on final approach with visible control difficulties. Prepare for immediate response upon touchdown. Foam systems are charged and ready for deployment." In the control tower, Colonel Hayes watched the drama unfold while simultaneously coordinating with higher headquarters about the personnel situation involving Lisa's concealed identity. The immediate focus remained on Morrison's survival, but the administrative implications would require extensive investigation once the emergency concluded. Morrison crossed 100 feet above the runway with his hydraulic pressure gauge showing 150 psi, so low that his flight controls were operating entirely on backup systems, never designed to handle the stress of an actual landing. The F-35's advanced flight computers continued working to maintain stability, but their effectiveness was severely compromised by the lack of hydraulic power. "Major Chen, I'm at 50 feet and reducing power to idle. The aircraft is settling faster than normal, and I'm having difficulty controlling the descent rate." Lisa's response reflected her intimate knowledge of F-35 emergency characteristics gained through years of dangerous test flights. "Viper lead, that's expected. Add a burst of power to slow your descent, then cut power completely just before touchdown. You're going to hit harder than normal, but the aircraft can handle it." Morrison executed Lisa's instructions with the precision of a pilot who understood that his life depended on following expert guidance exactly. His F-35 approached the runway at a slightly steeper angle than normal, but within parameters that would allow survival if he could maintain control through the final moments. Captain Torres, flying parallel to Morrison's approach, provided continuous updates on his aircraft's external appearance. "Viper lead, you're looking good from the outside. The aircraft appears stable, landing gear is properly positioned, you're going to make it." At 20 feet above the runway, Morrison's hydraulic pressure finally reached 0. His flight controls became completely ineffective except for rudder trim and engine thrust, leaving him dependent entirely on the aircraft's momentum and aerodynamic stability to complete the landing. "Major Chen, 0 hydraulic pressure. I have no control authority except engine power." "Viper lead, you're committed now. Keep the wings level and let the aircraft land itself. Cut power to idle in 3, 2, 1, now." Morrison's F-35 touched down on runway 21L with a firm impact that sent vibrations through the aircraft's structure, but remained within design limits. The landing was harder than normal but successful, with all 3 landing gear absorbing the shock as intended. However, without hydraulic power for wheel brakes or nose wheel steering, the aircraft began rolling down the runway with no means of stopping except aerodynamic drag and wheel friction. "Touchdown confirmed," Air Traffic Controller Walsh announced. "The aircraft is rolling along with no apparent braking action." The F-35 continued down the 10,000-foot runway at decreasing speed as aerodynamic drag gradually reduced its momentum. Morrison sat in his cockpit, alive, but unable to control his aircraft's ground movement. watching the runway markers pass by while calculating whether he would stop before running out of pavement. Master Sergeant Kane's crash rescue vehicles followed the rolling aircraft while maintaining safe distances in case of emergency. His teams were prepared for various scenarios, including the possibility that Morrison might need to shut down his engine and evacuate the aircraft immediately upon stopping. Rescue units, aircraft appear to be decelerating normally. The pilot is maintaining control of the ground roll. Prepare for standard emergency procedures once the aircraft comes to rest. Lisa continued monitoring Morrison's situation through telemetry data and radio communications. Her expertise had guided him through the most challenging phase of the emergency, but the successful landing validated years of test flight work that had developed the procedures now saving his life. Viper Lead, outstanding work. You've successfully completed one of the most difficult emergency landings possible in the F-35. How are you feeling, and is the aircraft showing any signs of fire or structural damage? Morrison's voice carried exhaustion and relief as his aircraft finally rolled to a stop 8,500 feet down the runway, well within safety margins but using most of the available landing surface. Major Chen, I'm uninjured and the aircraft appears normal except for the hydraulic failure. Thank you for talking me through that approach. I couldn't have done it without your guidance. The crash rescue team surrounded Morrison's F-35 within seconds of it stopping, conducting safety checks and preparing to assist with pilot evacuation if necessary. Technical Sergeant Foster personally inspected the aircraft for signs of fire, fuel leaks, or structural damage that might require immediate emergency response. Colonel Hayes breathed his first relaxed breath in over an hour as confirmation came that Morrison was safe and his aircraft was secure. The emergency had been resolved successfully, but the revelation about Lisa's background created new challenges that would require careful handling. Major Chen, that was exceptional work. You've saved Captain Morrison's life and a $90 million aircraft through expertise that I'm still trying to understand. We need to discuss your status and how you ended up serving in an enlisted capacity for 3 years. Lisa's response reflected the complex personal decisions that had led her to seek anonymity after her test pilot career. Sir, I needed a break from the pressures of test flying and wanted to contribute to military aviation in a different way. Working in maintenance gave me perspective on aircraft operations that I never had as a pilot. Technical Sergeant Williams, who had worked alongside Lisa for 3 years without knowing her true background, approached her with a mixture of respect and bewilderment. Major Chen, I don't know what to say. You've been teaching us about aircraft maintenance while having qualifications that exceed most of our pilots. Williams, I've learned as much from working with the maintenance teams as I taught. Understanding how aircraft are maintained and the challenges maintenance personnel face made me a better engineer and pilot. That knowledge was crucial for guiding Captain Morrison through this emergency. Captain Morrison, after completing his post-emergency procedures and briefing with medical personnel, sought out Lisa to personally thank her for her guidance during the crisis. His survival had depended entirely on her expertise and calm professionalism under pressure. Major Chen, I owe you my life. Your knowledge of emergency procedures and ability to remain calm during the crisis made the difference between survival and catastrophe. How can the Air Force have someone with your qualifications working in maintenance without anyone knowing? Lisa's answer reflected her philosophical approach to military service and professional development. Captain Morrison, every job in the Air Force contributes to the mission. I found value in understanding aircraft operations from the ground level, and that perspective made me more effective when my expertise was needed most. 6 months later, Major Lisa Chen had been restored to her proper rank and assigned as the chief test pilot for F-35 developmental programs at Edwards Air Force Base. Her experience working in maintenance had provided unique insights that influenced aircraft design improvements and emergency procedure refinements. The emergency landing that had revealed her identity became a case study in pilot training programs and validated the importance of having technical experts available during crisis situations. Morrison recovered fully and continued his flying career, eventually becoming a test pilot himself under Lisa's mentorship. Colonel Hayes often reflected on the lesson learned about making assumptions about people's capabilities based on their apparent roles. The quiet maintenance technician who had scheduled appointments and processed work orders for 3 years had possessed expertise that saved lives when it mattered most. Lisa's story became legendary throughout the Air Force test pilot community, demonstrating that expertise remains valuable regardless of how it's applied. and that sometimes the most qualified person in the room is the one nobody expects to speak up. Her dual perspective as both pilot and maintenance expert made her uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between operations and support, improving aircraft reliability and safety for future generations of military aviators. The investigation into Lisa's 3-year service in an enlisted capacity revealed systemic issues within Air Force personnel management that had allowed her situation to go undetected. Brigadier General Martinez personally oversaw reforms that improved tracking of personnel with specialized qualifications, ensuring that expertise would be properly utilized while respecting individual career choices. Morrison's emergency landing video recorded by base security cameras became required viewing at pilot training schools worldwide. The footage showed textbook execution of emergency procedures under impossible conditions, with ground-based technical expertise providing crucial guidance that made survival possible. Aviation safety experts analyzed every aspect of the emergency, using Lisa's innovative guidance techniques to improve training protocols. Chief Master Sergeant Valdez conducted extensive interviews with maintenance personnel who had worked with Lisa, discovering that her influence on aircraft reliability had been significant, even in her enlisted role. Her meticulous attention to detail and deep understanding of aircraft systems had prevented numerous potential failures through proactive maintenance practices that went beyond standard procedures. Captain Torres, who had provided crucial support during Morrison's emergency approach, was selected for test pilot training based partly on her performance during the crisis. Her ability to maintain formation with a disabled aircraft while providing accurate flight path information demonstrated the kind of situational awareness and technical competence that test pilot programs sought in candidates. The Nevada Test and Training Range established new protocols for emergency situations based on lessons learned from Morrison's hydraulic failure. These procedures emphasized the importance of having technical experts immediately available during crisis situations, and created communication channels that allowed rapid access to specialized knowledge regardless of an expert's official position or rank. Lisa's transition back to test pilot duties included development of new emergency training scenarios that incorporated her maintenance experience. She designed realistic failure simulations that better prepared pilots for actual emergencies by understanding not just what systems could fail, but how maintenance personnel identified and addressed potential problems before they became critical. The F-35 Program Office at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base requested Lisa's input on design modifications that would improve aircraft controllability during hydraulic system failures. Her unique combination of flight test experience and maintenance knowledge provided insights that purely operational pilots or ground-based engineers might not have recognized. Morrison's squadron adopted new pre-flight procedures that emphasized closer coordination between pilots and maintenance personnel. Lisa's experience demonstrated that maintenance technicians often possessed detailed knowledge of aircraft systems that could prove crucial during emergency situations, leading to enhanced communication protocols between flight and ground crews. Technical Sergeant Williams was promoted to Staff Sergeant ahead of schedule, partly in recognition of his professional growth while working alongside Lisa. His exposure to her advanced technical knowledge had elevated his own expertise, making him one of the most knowledgeable F-35 maintenance specialists in the Air Force. The annual Air Force Test Pilot School Symposium featured Lisa as the keynote speaker, where she addressed the importance of cross-functional experience in developing aviation professionals. Her presentation emphasized how understanding aircraft from multiple perspectives, pilot, engineer, and maintainer, created more effective problem-solving capabilities during crisis situations. Colonel Hayes received commendation for his handling of the emergency, particularly his decision to trust Lisa's expertise despite the unusual circumstances of her concealed identity. His leadership during the crisis demonstrated the importance of recognizing and utilizing available expertise regardless of traditional hierarchical structures. Master Sergeant Kane's crash rescue teams incorporated lessons from Morrison's emergency into their training programs. The incident highlighted the importance of preparing for extended aircraft rollouts when pilots lost braking capability, leading to improved positioning strategies and response procedures for similar emergencies. Air Traffic Controller Walsh was recognized for her professional handling of the emergency coordination, maintaining clear communication channels between multiple agencies while managing the complex logistics of clearing airspace and coordinating emergency services. Her performance became a model for training programs at air traffic control schools. The Pentagon released a comprehensive report on the incident that became required reading for senior military leaders, emphasizing how individual career decisions could result in valuable expertise being utilized in unexpected ways. The report recommended policy changes that would better track and utilize personnel with specialized qualifications while respecting their career preferences. Lisa's story inspired other military professionals to reconsider their own career paths and the value of cross-functional experience. Several test pilots requested assignments to maintenance units, while experienced maintenance personnel applied for flight training, creating a more diverse and technically competent aviation community. The F-35 that Morrison had landed was repaired and returned to service within 2 weeks, incorporating design improvements that Lisa had recommended based on her emergency experience. The aircraft's maintenance history was annotated to reflect its role in validating emergency procedures, making it a valuable training asset for future pilots. Morrison's emergency approach became the subject of academic study at the Air Force Academy, where cadets analyzed the decision-making processes and technical expertise that had enabled survival in a seemingly impossible situation. The case demonstrated how theoretical knowledge gained practical application during real-world emergencies. The maintenance hangar where Lisa had worked for 3 years was renamed the Major Lisa Chen Maintenance Excellence Center in recognition of her contributions to aircraft reliability and safety. The facility became a model for maintenance operations throughout the Air Force, emphasizing the professional development and technical expertise of maintenance personnel. Years later, when interviewed about her unique career path, Lisa consistently emphasized that every position in military aviation contributed essential value to mission success. Her experience demonstrated that expertise could remain dormant for years before becoming crucial, and that the most important qualifications often involved wisdom and judgment, rather than just technical knowledge. The emergency that had revealed Lisa's hidden identity ultimately strengthened the entire Air Force aviation community by demonstrating the importance of recognizing and valuing expertise wherever it existed. Her story became a powerful reminder that assumptions about people's capabilities based on their apparent roles could prevent organizations from utilizing their most valuable human resources when they were needed most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.